This is an interview with Mr. William A. Cahill, born July 14th, 1913. The date is May the 27th, 2004. Interviewer is Robert Gardner. Interview is taking place at the Atlanta History Center. Mr. Cahill, what war and branch of service did you serve in?
United States Navy. I enlisted and was assigned to the Marine Corps because the Marine Corps doesn't have a medical department. A lot of people don't know that, and it's ridiculous, but it happens to be the case. And for every time you see Marines doing almost anything, there has to be a corpsman among the group just for their security and safety, because of what a corpsman can do to you if you're bad hurt.
Where were you living at the time that you enlisted, sir?
It went.
Where were you living at the time that you enlisted?
Oh,
It's not that important.
it's it's Jacksonville, Florida, and at the moment I can't remember that street address.
That's fine. Why did you join?
Pearl Harbor, of course, prompted me to enlist immediately. But I was already 1A in the draft, and there was when the numbers began to call and all, and my number came up. Well, it didn't make sense for me to be number 9 jillion something when I could just go over to the recruiting office and line up, because I was manager of a funeral home, had been there 10 years, and there was a licensing bomber in Florida, and my interest in anything related to public safety and stuff like that prompted me to just go ahead and enlist early, because I knew that, and the owner of the firm was selling the company because she was a very elderly lady, and I had run it for her and managed it for her for a number of years.
Why did you pick the service branch that you did to join?
Family background. I had a couple of uncles that were surgeons in the U.S. Navy medical operations, and I once got an appointment to Annapolis, and my father died before I could even remotely take advantage of it, and he had been in a hospital 5 years. He was a locomotive engineer in a terrible plane crash, railroad crash, and if you want the details, I'll be happy to squeeze it in, because he was on the Florida East Coast Railroad when the trains had to pass each other. Sometimes one had to get in a siding. Okay, and this particular time, when a train does get into a siding, then someone else can pull out while a faster through train can pass, get on down the road. And someone that was the flagman, and they do it with lanterns. Back in those days, you see, they have walkie-talkies now, but the signals, lamps and all, that there was a train coming or whatever, and when that brakeman, a flagman, woke up and jumped up and started running back towards this passenger train that was coming at him at about 80 miles an hour with 16 big steel Pullman cars. The procedure under those conditions, since there was going to be a rear-end collision because they were hitting this freight train, and that when just before they hit, he got out on his side down on a step, and his fireman did on the other side to jump. That was the only way you could be saved. Usually you learn to do a roll. He jumped on top of his fireman and killed him. Well, but my dad landed on his chest, got all chewed up with the gravel and sort of thing, and never recovered because he was in the U.S. the Florida East Coast Railroad hospital in St. Augustine, Florida. And it was handy because I was going to grammar school there nearby, and that's how that came about.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Yes, sir. When I walked in, I was greeted by one of Jacksonville's most prominent doctors that had an office not too far from the funeral home that I was I'd lived in it, the funeral home, 10 years. He, when he found out that I was enlisting as a corpsman, he insisted that when I get through with that, he wanted me to come over into his office, and he insisted that I fill in papers to start out as a second lieutenant, because I had had 4 years of pre-med up at Temple University in Philadelphia, and because after my father died, my mother later remarried to the professor up there, and that he invited me up, and as our profession was somebody had come up with a smart idea on how easy it was to create a brass mask so accurate that you could see any pore, and that it was a technique to do that. And he had me come up there to learn how to do it, because there was such a market for it in Florida. A lot of older people retired, come down there, and then once they had retired or something, they didn't want to go to, if you put them in the cemetery, then you have to kiss them goodbye. But if you could get one of these metal things done, that sits on a pedestal and all that. That's it. I'm sorry, it's long answer.
Okay. Can you tell me about your boot camp and training experiences?
After enlisting as a second-class pharmacist mate, that was their decision, but because of pre-med background, I was told to report to Mayport, which is about 20 miles from where we were in downtown Jacksonville, at the mouth of the St. Johns River. And that was a shrimp boat headquarters for deep sea fishing and all that sort of thing for decades. And the let me see. Oh, since I was a corpsman, to give shots down there for tetanus and typhoid and all kinds of malaria, other things, because they were trying to get troops out of the way. People lined up trying to enlist, and but they had to have certain shots and stuff. And so I was sent down to Mayport, and that became a submarine turning basin, aircraft turning basin, and small submarines, because the nuclear subs then are down at St. Mary's, only about 20 miles away. but in that special facility that the government has for the nuclear subs, because they cost so darn much.
How did you get through your basic training?
I was handed a board that was about 5 inches wide at the bottom and about 1 inch wide up at the other end, and it was 36 inches long. And I stood in line there with a bunch of other people that were that had enlisted, and we were getting some basic training to learn the manual of arms, if you're familiar with all that, and to learn to do as commands said without hesitation and all that. And that was a sufficient reason, I guess.
Do you remember any of your basic training instructors?
No, only a couple of doctors that were there, because they also checked these people for other vital signs. I can't remember any of them now, because this was prior to 19 and I believe 45. I'm not sure.
What war did you serve in?
World War II.
Where exactly did you go?
From Jacksonville, I was sent first down to Mayport as just a one-horse medical person. And because they had people down there that were beginning to work on those shrimp boats because of some patrolling we were beginning to do there. And from Mayport, I was, after getting everybody caught up on shots and everything, I was transferred, and it surprised me, a one-person transfer to the U.S. Naval Hospital in Jacksonville, which is one of the largest of their hospitals. And let's see, from there, well, you want me to keep going on that aspect? Okay. While I was there, I learned in the wards there how many of the young officers were 90-day wonders that had some limited college, and they were eligible for starting in as I forgot what they are, but anyhow, a young officer, a naval officer, and they were, none of them had professional backgrounds like I did, or a few other things. And let me see. Anyhow, I learned as much as I could and found out in a hurry they were learning from me more, because I had more first aid, more autopsies, and more all kinds of accidents and injuries because of having lived in a funeral home 10 years.
Where exactly did you go on your military assignment, your first duty station after that?
Orders came in. They were with a 105-pound wave that had just gotten in from somewhere, just shipped in, to relieve a corpsman that was on duty at the U.S. Naval Hospital, which was me, and a hospital jam-packed with over almost 3,000 patients. And with all of the aircraft, all of the airports in the flat ground of Georgia, of Florida, and all of the flying and pre-flight training and all that stuff, it was there was a need for corpsmen, just for Mickey Mouse band-aids and any kind of dressing you could think of that a corpsman was qualified to take care of.
Did you see any combat?
I sure did. In going overseas, orders came in for one corpsman out of the hospital to report to Port Hueneme above Santa Barbara, California, a massive supply depot that had supplies 3 and 4 stories high that must have covered a couple of 100 acres, and ships lined up trying to get people fitted, trying to cram people into uniforms and to let them teach them something so that these ships could get on out and take personnel, and especially a load of fuel and uniforms or whatever was needed to take it with them to the South Pacific. That was the first assignment, and we landed there just after sundown, and the next morning when and I was still aboard ship. In fact, all of us were. And it was daylight, and our ship, 500 feet long, jam-packed with material of every description, fuel, ammunition, all kinds of stuff. And it was, we were tied to a tree because it was right at the end of the strip, and the water was 90 feet deep. And that was the quickest way to, with their rigs, to pick these trucks up and all kinds of things. And I'm coming to the trucks. I learned that pretty soon that we had dropped the truck. When we first started to lift this stuff and put it on the ground, they dropped the truck. And somebody had to take a cable down and hook it so that they could winch it back up, which they did. I watched them do it. And I didn't do it personally because I didn't have any gear with me, and I wasn't a good diver. I didn't have that much experience. But anyhow, that's that part. Let me see what else might have happened related to that. Troops beginning to come, just increased, and patients that were banged up in this flight training, and then the Germans had learned enough about our coastline to sink us with mines by turning the mines loose with submarines about 20 miles out near the Gulf Stream, and they would drift in, and without a hook on the bottom of the chain. And when it hit the dirt, just like it does on anchors, and it would dig in, and then it would automatically pull that mine down below the surface of the water so that you couldn't see it and avoid it. And then they were sinking so many ships that were coming around the coast because of our supply lines that for fuel for the factories in the north and east that had to go across the Gulf of Mexico, below Key West, and up the chain of islands and coast of Florida, and then up the Atlantic coast all the way up into the New England states. And then they began to have the pipelines working, and then of course that slowed down a lot. However, big gear that you don't put in the pipeline, trucks and airplanes that were being manufactured, and we out of along the Gulf Coast, especially out of New Orleans, there were so many small tanks, well, I don't know where the guns came from at that time, anti-aircraft, some kinds of weapons, trucks, jeeps. A lot of that stuff was coming in to Jacksonville because they were used in training. It was like places people waiting for them, where they had a whole bunch of troops, but they didn't have that jeep to practice on.
What were your combat assignments?
In that branch of the military, when the Marines, that's what they were, had to come ashore, in most of the islands in the South Pacific then, had coral reefs right up under the surface of the water. Okay. And when these landing craft came in, sometimes they could ride clear over that and then come on ashore. But if they couldn't, then they would be stuck up there like in a shooting gallery. And the Japanese had been waiting for us for over 4 years. From the tops of sand dunes and elevation, they were all in trenches with machine guns. And at where the sand dunes were thinned out down towards the beach, where the tides would make the ground hard and that sort of thing. That was what we had to cross to even make any kind of an approach successfully where the Japs were concerned, because you couldn't see them, you couldn't get all that baloney. So we, as a corps, and every 10 Marines that came out of one of these landing crafts, one corpsman was supposed to be with them. And since this was so early in the war, I seemed to be the first one out there. And I did go on 3 different landings, and they only asked you to do 2 because the survival rate was so poor. And I was surprised when I did find out that, well, I'm coming to something else, I'll wait for that.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Yes, in the Marine Corps, historically, has been about the highest in all countries. And in wartime, with so many new troops, new people, enlistees and all that sort of thing, the corpsman, excuse me, when we got there, beg your pardon, when we got to the beach the first time, and I had been loaded out beyond the range of guns from a ship when these landing crafts were swung off tankers or whatever it was, and then we made a run ashore. Sometimes we did in the dark. But to do that, it was so hazardous that and we learned all of a sudden, I'm surprised they waited that long to figure it out, that all officers took their bars off their helmets. All enlisted men were ordered not to say sir to any officer, because if they were captured, then that was a bigger worse loss. And let's see, what was the thing on corpsman? A corpsman, we took off our red crosses because the Japs got smart, because they would be in the fringes of our camps as we took these islands all the way up. Remember, there's 2,900 miles of little old islands and under all conditions, and all the way up to just to the Philippines. And these
Japanese?
I'm sorry. These combat troops that ran ashore, the corpsman was the last off the boat, off the landing craft. And his mission, and he was the only one unarmed. He did have tourniquets, and he did have morphine and a few things like that, and some pads that he could apply. But his mission was to drop with the first person that was already down, and stay perfectly still, because the guy that was on the ground had been picked off maybe just 200 or 300 feet up on this elevation. And if he lay perfectly still, sometimes they didn't start shooting back at either one of him or the man that was the patient on the ground. But the corpsman was, if it was hemorrhaging, the degree of it was important. That if you could do certain things with a pad, if you could do certain things with a tourniquet, you did it. If it was a tourniquet, then you're cutting off circulation. And you're going to have to amputate unless you remove that tourniquet within a reasonable length of time. So the corpsman had a marker, and you'd put T on the forehead, and you'd put down the number of grains that you gave and the time. And then you try to wiggle on over to somebody else. Or I learned to turn around on your stomach and with the collar and just drag that patient up towards the outer line of sight, out of whatever it was. That was part of the way we did things. It's a blunt description, but that's how we survived. A lot of us. But the casualty rate was the highest for the corpsman of any service, and it probably still is because of the nature of the way it operates. You see, even on our battleships today, with all of the 10,000 naval personnel that's aboard, almost all of the anti-aircraft shooting is done by Marines. This is it.
Were you awarded any medals or citations, sir?
No, sir. I came out after being in a hospital for 3 or 4 months, and I better back up if it's appropriate or if you don't mind. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, about the 3rd or 4th day that we had been anchored. Our ship had come in. We were tied to the tree. When the whatever it was, with the bugle, they woke us all up, the whole crowd. There were, I think, 14 Marines and 2 corpsmen. One was a pharmacist mate. One was a pharmacist out of a drugstore in the States. Anyhow, we were hustled down at the beach, to the beach, right near there. But we were told by our officers, take everything you've got with you because you're not apt to come back. And they were right because of the plane loss. When we stood in pouring down rain for almost 2 hours, driving rain, with all of our gear getting wet and everything else soaked. But this was in December, and it didn't make a lot of difference down near the equator. We were at DC-3, one of our light freight planes, in Ireland mostly, stopped to pick us up, and they loaded 12 corpsmen, 12 Marines, 2 corpsmen, of course we were Navy, and I think there were 3 or 4 other guys that just happened to be on the damn beach. I don't think they were doctors because we were too short for them. Anyhow, we took off in blinding rain, and it had been raining there for almost 2 months. And we had been in the air, I believe, about 40 minutes when the pilot came on and said that he had news for us that was very important that everybody listen. That the strip that we were to land on was 250 meters too short because the weather had been so bad that they hadn't been able to grade with the tractors or front end loaders, whatever it was. And the mud was so slippery and sliding that you couldn't land the plane on it safely. But they were contemplating, no, they said with the strip, since our plane was overloaded too, because they put a lot of damn stuff along with it, crates of these, and it took 2 or 3 men to pick up 1 box of them, and a few other things. That crammed in the damn plane, we were already overloaded. when the pilot said that when we touch ground, we will be sliding mostly out of control because we do not dare try to use the propellers because on a flat ground it's different than in the mud, and that we'd all end up. Also, they said that since we cannot stop in view of what they've told us, the radar people, or radio, if we do not stop short of the end of that strip, no one will survive because the plane will be in 90 feet of water. That's how that came about. Okay. And that in a closed plane, with everything jammed up, and you are dead straight down, you won't even survive just the depth. So the pilot had said that a good rule is for us to spin the plane to the left before we get to the end. We're still sliding, probably out of control in the mud. But if he could spin the plane and wipe out that right wing, then we've got 1,200 gallons of high-test gasoline and a red-hot motor, all of it on the ground. And we have to get our asses out of the neighborhood as fast as we can. Therefore, I think that was the terminology he used. He said, when the moment we hit the ground and the plane is sliding, you'll know. He said, I'll tell you over the intercom. He said, you will have to jump. And I want everybody to have their life belt, which is a little rubber one, and had 2 little cans of compressed air, pull it. These life belts will keep you afloat if we're in the water. But that was before we landed. But when the plane stopped sliding, we were to jump, be lined up as close as you could. You do not have time to look. You do not have time to make up your mind because some of us want to survive. And then we did. We just like that. I jumped and crushed both ankles because we didn't have combat gear on. I was a corpsman and just wear a GI shoes. They were high leather shoes. But they were soaking wet in mud because it had been raining where we were so much. You wading everywhere you went. Anyhow, I can recall getting up winded because when you jump, I think when a plane is sitting on the ground flat, under any conditions, you got to have a little ladder to get up in the damn thing. Okay, usually it's 4 or 5 feet up. But in an airport, of course, you roll up a bunch of steps so you can get up higher. On this plane, he said, the pilot called our attention. He said that door will be open and you folks will be falling backwards. But he said that will be on top of the ship. Climb up and jump regardless. You do not have time to look because it'll cost you your own life. That was kept crammed down our throats. Anyhow, all of us did, to my knowledge, except 3. And then when the damn plane blew up, the 3 of them, I don't know what happened to them. We did, what I did was take to cover to get nearer those damn sand dunes because these jokers could pick us off like stuff sitting on a dining room table if you were right out there at the edge of the water or the edge of the strip. But what we did was I climbed. In fact, I remember my feet began to tell me I was hurt, and I remember crawling up into sand and debris and whatever. And I think I stayed pretty still until daylight, and then somebody came along and to rescue you. But these jokers up there were still shooting at us. And I was supposed to get a combat ribbon for that, get a Purple Heart on that thing. I never did. first, I didn't apply for it because I didn't know I needed to. And second, the couple of ribbons that I did get through the mail, because every now and then you'd see guys that get his. There was some a good conduct medal. Is that one? Yeah. And a couple others, I forgot what the kind they were. But I did end up with 3 that I still got at home. And but I never got any more medals. Oh, excuse me. With these crushed ankles, I was in bad shape for further combat for some little time, obviously. And when they finally got me back to a rear area, I think I was a week maybe there, just wet and muddy. All of us messed up. And the doctors came along and gave me a lot of morphine, mostly, I think. And I had to take my shoes off because my feet had swollen so bad. And then when the daylight came, some of these more able-bodied citizens, I can recall being helped and carried back to the island that we landed on, had been virtually wiped out before we got there, because that was the Japanese had raided them and killed them and done all kinds of things. That's the reason we were just a rescue unit. And at the moment, that's all I know, except that later on, I ended up with ace bandages on these feet. And from then on, for the next months, I was mostly in a cot that because I could lay down. And at the side of the cot, I had a little old Mickey Mouse shovel. I could dig that little trench just a little bit further and use it. And then with your left hand, push that dirt on top of what you put in it. This isn't nice, but that's what happened that I can remember. Let me see. Injuries. No, we landed somewhere a few months later, and it was Green Island, and I had just open shoes that I'd taken a knife and cut out holes around so you could get your feet in somehow. And that's about all, because we were waiting for better weather, that's right, for me to get to a rear area where orthopedic doctors could do something for you. And I was the oldest of the enlisted Marines and me. I was only old. I was 28 years old then. And the doctors, and I was usually in the first aid tent, or the strip was always damn telephone or something. And the doctors told me to well, I forgot what they told me. I remember it was something I abided by.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
I didn't during that period. I may have, once we got settled on that island, excuse me, there was a typewriter that came with the office. And I happened to be in high school when my dad was dying in a hospital and all that sort of thing. And I had a chance to go to a typing and shorthand class before school started. And I was just a junior in a small town high school. And they could, I did all of the reporting of everything for the doctors, because first they, just like a prescription, they talked in a lot of, architectural things, not architectural, bone and injuries and diagnosis. And doctors, with a guy banged up there, remember we were a long ways from a hospital or rescue or anything, they would try to get on paper a statement or description of this person, his service number and all that sort of thing, so that when we had a chance, we could mail that into somewhere so that it would be in their track record. And I did it for everybody but myself. But you might know. Anyhow, in that dumb thing, we, I think I've got to stop there for a few minutes. I can't remember what happened after that.
What was the food like?
Dehydrated, in a word. It was not too bad. Water was something that used to aggravate us. We used a lot of halazone tablets, and these beaches that we used, the natives, and they were fuzzy boys as they called them, little bitty people, that lived around these places where they could get their little boats or canoes, what it was, over the coral reef if it was a low one, a small one, or whatever it was, or it had been knocked down. And later on, when we had to, we were losing too many people going ashore on that type of landing, Andrew Higgins was turning out these increasingly bigger and smarter landing craft. And it worked. And there was always a corpsman on one of them, me, because I never missed on one of them. And when we did get ashore, well, I don't know why I even started to say that. Well, I was in a crash somewhere when I had been a good swimmer and heard about the underwater demolition. That's right, underwater. And just below us, about 40 miles, there was a Navy had sent somebody out there to teach these guys how to dynamite these coral reefs so that we could get ashore wherever we needed to, or in the best place. And all I know is I went down there, and the first thing they asked me to do was to swim down to this point over here. It was 200 feet underwater. I was the only one who could do it. But I had been a stunt diver, with a big old swimming pool in Jacksonville. And for fun, we did all kinds of things. And the stunt diving was, we did it and got paid for it around some hotels and the resorts on the East Coast on weekends. And I could earn $25. That was more than I was getting from the military, because when I signed in to go aboard the first time I left those doctors up there, whatever it was, or the hospital, wherever I was, that I did not need a draw, and never took one. And because I learned about what I deviated from the typing reports that the doctors wanted. Since I was good at shorthand, well, these doctors, they didn't hesitate a moment stopping me doing anything, even if I was in my own bunk, and asked me to write down this and that and whatever, because if we were having to evacuate someone to a forward area, and the doctor would write down, if I wasn't there to do it, he'd write down on a piece of paper or something. And then when transportation, sometimes it would be a DC-3 drop-in, sometimes it would be a boat, it would landing craft of some description. That was part of the rig. Anyhow, underwater, in that underwater demolition, beg your pardon, when I went back to our camp to demonstrate what I could do, I mean, that since I could do it
Mhm.
at 20, hell, I told them, oh, hey, you don't do the same thing. If you can't, I'll come after you, whatever. And we did swim. I did do 200 feet underwater. I do remember that one time. Then I got to thinking I was showing off, but and quit. But the that was the end of that episode. And somewhere I was in a plane crash. Wow, I don't remember that one.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Sir?
Do you recall the day your service ended?
No, because I was in a hospital in a wheelchair. And what had happened was that they finally got me back to a rear area. And remember, I had still all these feet all broken up. And when I got near x-ray, these bones were out of position and had begun to lock up a fuse together. Okay. And I remember the doctor's orthopedic, I think it was orthopedist was there, told me that you're in bad enough shape as it is, but any monkeying around can make it worse. So let's just sit tight until we can get you further back somewhere. And in that situation, I think that they were taking some patients that wouldn't last long enough till next Monday or whenever the truck somebody came by. And we loaded 2 or 3 of those. And since I had everybody's health record, and I had already prepared it for the doctor's signature and all that stuff, and including myself, because I was going on that particular run, and they were going to leave me up there, wherever it was. At that point, I didn't know where it was. And but later on, I finally got back, but on very limited duty, because my feet looked so bad, and they needed to surgically do certain things, and they said, we don't know anybody out here that we ought to trust to do that, and we don't want to. I do remember some old doctor telling me that he said, son, you're going to end up being in a damn wheelchair the rest of your life in a veterans hospital if we don't do something. But we feel that if we try to do it here, you might be worse off than if we can wait a little bit longer. And pretty soon, I did get back to another island, and they did some things. And then the war was over. Yeah, and a couple of things stems from it. I'll keep talking if it doesn't matter.
That's okay.
When the war was over out there, the troops that were piled up everywhere on the Pacific coast, because they'd been working factory jobs and around San Francisco, that's where we were, until they moved me over to Oak Knoll Naval Hospital, which was a new one. It had 11,000 beds, and they just put these prefab, looked like mobile homes, but they were putting them all over this golf course because they could do it sitting around on the darn grass. And we were trying to get by, but the troops that were coming in from overseas wanted to get home. And I stayed busy typing up medical reports or doctors' opinions and something, so that these guys would have something in black and white when they got somewhere else. And I know darn well that it worked, because later on I heard from some of these guys that they said, if you hadn't interceded so-and-so, which is not important.
What did you do in the days and weeks after you were discharged from the service?
I went back to Jacksonville, Florida to pick up the pieces. While I was overseas, and 2 weeks before I could get back to the States, 3 weeks, the owner of the elderly lady that had owned that funeral home was finally buried. She died, had been in a hospital, whatever. And her heirs had been able to strip this big funeral home. It was a $500,000 building because that's what the damn thing cost to build. It was a beautiful one, big one, in the heart of Jacksonville, Florida. By heart, I mean 2 blocks from the main park there. Let's see, what did I start to say then? Lost it.
We're talking about getting back to Jacksonville.
Oh yeah. To get there, I was not in that big a hurry because my first wife, our marriage, before I left, that's something I should have told you way up front. A couple of years before the war started, I discovered that one of my close friends was scoutmaster over in western part of Jacksonville. And I was scoutmaster over in the nice residential section of Ortega in the western part of Jacksonville. Okay. And we were competitive. A lot of the Boy Scouts used to do a whole lot of things in teams and stuff. Anyhow, with these with that, this guy and I got to be good friends. I used to resent the fact that when we were anywhere, on the ground, anything. I remember the war wasn't on then, but we went to the same parties because our wives were there and all that sort of thing. That if we he was the type that would come out, the drinks are all on me. Well, it used to make me so damn mad because I had been wiped out. My dad was gone. My mother had 3 children. I was the only one that was old enough to do anything. And I was their only, really, the sole source of support. Because I had 3 jobs. I remember newspapers and magazine route, and working for a dry cleaner, and then cleaning up a grocery store every Friday night, Saturday night, so that I could have all the window stuff that would be thrown out. And so I managed. But that was part of our survival or getting along. And this, I discovered that this fella's was a playboy. I didn't realize that until I got to know him. You didn't find it out in the Boy Scouts. Anyhow, later on I found out that he was just a nice, sharp, smart, well-dressed fellow. But that his wife was smart as hell. And she was a little bit caustic. And she was a little bit older than either one of us. She was 2 years older than I, and I think only 1 year older than he was. And which shouldn't have entered into it. But she worked for a magazine, and now this war is just starting. And she had been editor in rank in publications and all for a number of years. And the man that owned it owned this magazine that was mostly a confidential source for everything that happened in the whole damn state of Florida, where the courts were concerned. Jobs, lawsuits, and all kinds of things. And this man, Owen, was politically, he was the one that was so smart about who got money and who didn't. And I later learned what a sharp operator he was. He got in that situation, I got to meet his wife. Okay, I met his wife. And took her to there was a sunrise, I asked her, he'd been dead maybe 7, 8 months. And there was a shrine club down, had a sunrise service at the beaches. And I was getting ready to go to that thing because I was in the Oriental band. Not that that's important, but the Oriental band. And here, I asked her at someplace we crossed paths, and I said, "Have you started dating anybody yet?" And she said, "No." And she said, "I'm afraid to." I said, "Well, let me take you to the beach in the morning. There'll be 1,000 Shriners down there, and you'll know a lot of people." And she admitted it. So I went by the next morning and picked her up, took her to the beach, 18 miles. And we attended to run the sunrise service. And it was over, I brought her back home. And and of course I lived in the funeral home at that point still. And the owner of the funeral home, she was still alive then, was relying on me almost entirely for business and whatever it was. And so she liked my wife, and because they were all Catholic except me. And I learned that this guy would like to come out of a bar or whatever it was that the drinks on, all that sort of thing. For the simple damn reason is he didn't pay for it, his wife did. But she had so goddamn much high income, and her boss didn't give a damn because they were both rich and the thriving business. That explains that deal. So later, I found out what a genuine and smart and good-looking person. And I think I let a month go by, and I asked her to go to a movie one night somewhere. And she went. And then, I was vice president of the Little Theater. That's a dramatic thing. And that was a safe place that anybody could go. And so I took her to that. And here came the war, fouling up. Okay, in a hurry. And that made that she got the idea that we ought to get married because there was a panic. Everybody wanted to marry these kids off, or the wives, the girls off, so that somebody else would support them, I guess, whatever. Anyhow, so we got married just before the war was declared over. Yeah, whatever it was.
Started.
And but we got along fine. We were married 17 years, got along fine, but we had virtually nothing in common. And when I later got into public life and got so damn prominent because I got elected to everything, and everybody wanted you to be the president. I ended up president of 3 different insurance companies, big companies, at different times and other things. And then I went down to the courthouse, and after I had a whole bunch of people said, "You're the logical one to be the next sheriff of Duval County, and it's the most corrupt." Well, the newspapers, I had read in the paper that Jacksonville was the most corrupt city in the United States, and that the Duval County was the most corrupt county in the United States. And no wonder everything was so rotten. And that damn sheriff had been in office 26 years, rich as hell. And so I was just swamped by friends, and they were going to help me be the new sheriff and clean up the county. And they did, and I did. And I got elected so easy it was pitiful because I was so well known on television. And when I got elected handsomely, I go down to the damn courthouse, and here my wife, you met her today, she was down there in the criminal division on the confidential records or something, what it was. And I happened to see her down there, and I didn't even know this lady was on the payroll. And anyhow, I went over and asked her how come she was there, and she said, well, she said, it's been very interesting, and she said, I've been watching you, hoping that you would get elected, and she said, I've been with this group over here, been trying to talk you into it, and you didn't know it. Anyhow, within a month, I was alone. My father was dead. My mother had remarried. She was doing well. And so before I went overseas, I asked her she asked me to marry her. Let's be honest. Okay. And so I went on overseas, and I didn't come back for 3.5 years. And I was a little worse for wear, because I had been banged up.
Well, I want to thank you very much for doing this interview. It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, I'm an amateur at what you're doing, but I'm complimented and pleased. And of course, it's my family, they'll get a laugh at a lot of this stuff. And what my wife will say, or my daughter, they say, why the hell didn't you tell him that? Or this, or something that I forgot about. Because I have really had a colorful experience in all parts of the world. And I've organized some